Hello and welcome. We are your hosts Sandesh and Anshuman. In each episode, we will pick one seemingly boring security topic and talk about the good, the bad, and everything in between. So join us for some fun, some conversations, and some super hot takes about all things security in the boring Appsec podcast. Anshuman, how are you?
Good. RS is over. You're back. I'm still here. It's all good.
Yeah, it was a crazy 2 weeks. I was in B-Sides SF and in RSA, and before that, I was in the East Coast a little bit. RSA was kind of like crazy amount of, very impressive, but also insane kind of marketing that we got to saw. They were like they were like companies which bought Cybertrucks and painted with their colors and offered a ride around it.
Ooh, wow.
And
okay.
Yeah, that was very popular. There was one company which basically converted their booth into like a grocery store and then renamed like Doritos into DDoS and stuff like that. So they had like products which was like all the like I think Lay's was something else and stuff like that. So they had like a whole, and you could buy those things. Like a vendor was selling their t-shirts, so people buying, I think CrowdStrike it was, you could go buy CrowdStrike swag, right? So yeah, it was madness, but it was insane to see. It was great fun to see. It was also there's also the whole the innovation sandbox where there's a lot of up and coming companies that we talk about. That's obviously very exciting to me because I'm also building a company of my own. So it was great to see. So yeah, overall it was crazy. It took a long time, but it was great, right? So that was good. But today is the last episode of the season, right? So how does it feel? We've done what? This is the 10th episode, and I know we decided I think in August to do this, and we started recording only in Jan. But yeah, man, we finally made it. I guess.
Yeah, no, I feel pretty good. Like, this whole idea just spawned out of nothing, just us having conversations, and we've ended up recording almost a season. So yeah, I feel good. We've had some good reviews. People are able to resonate with what we have to say. Hopefully, we come back in season 2 with some of the other stuff that we haven't discussed, but hopefully we'll see
where it goes. Okay, so I think when we discussed what we want to do for the last episode, we kind of want to turn things around a little bit. So I think for the first 9 episodes, the theme we had was, hey, we'll pick one topic that we know something about. In some topics we knew a lot about it because we'd worked for years and years in this, and in some topics we'd worked only for a few years, but we'd collaborated with people, we learned from other people, and we spoke about that, right? But I think I want to kind of do something that we have not done this season, which is let's do some predictions, right? And obviously, like all predictions, our prediction will be wrong. It's election season in India, it'll be election season in the US pretty quickly, and we see all kinds of crazy predictions happening. But I think like every other industry in tech, cybersecurity is also going through like a lot of changes thanks to AI and a few other things. So what I want to do is maybe we pick up a few predictions each for what we think will change in the next year. So we'll go alternate. So for the audience, I haven't seen what's on Anshuman's list. Anshuman doesn't know what is on my list. So maybe there'll be no overlap. Maybe it'll all be different. So it'll be interesting to see kind of what we have, right? So Anshuman, do you want to go first? What's your first prediction for the next 12 months?
Yeah, and before I get started, just a quick disclaimer. So the way I have sort of brainstormed my predictions is in 2 categories: short term and long term. Short term basically something I hope to see in the next 1 to 2 years, and long term basically 3 to 4 years, right? So that's that, and most of my predictions are based on AI, as as we would imagine, just because there's like so much happening in this field. So yeah, all right. So the first prediction that I have is a short term one, and this is about AI agents, right? And I think we might have briefly spoken about this in the threat modeling episode, but the whole idea is that I hope to see more AI agents being sort of offered as services by companies, so things like source code review agent, a threat modeling agent, design review agent. I think OpenAI in fact has open sourced few ideas along these lines. We can add the link to the show notes, but the way I think about it is, previously, before AI became a thing, the noise was all about infrastructure scaling. Like, how can you solve AppSec or security problems in general by using technologies like containers and Kubernetes and all of that stuff, right? And I think that's going to change, right? Because we are no longer dependent on a piece of software to do a piece of security activity, right? I think it's mostly going to be all about AI agents. And with AI agents, I think the secret sauce is going to be the prompt. Writing good prompts is going to be the key, and training your agents to do essentially what you can do as a human is going to be where the value is at, right? And it's going to be that simple. You write a good prompt, you explain or you train the AI agent based on that prompt, and then you just have the agent go and do its job. Obviously, there's going to be a human in the loop aspect to it. I'm not going to say that it's all going to be automated. I don't think that's going to happen, but some form of automated agents trying to do security things that we've been doing manually ourselves.
Interesting. So I think there are two different schools of thoughts on how agents should be designed, right? So one way to think about it is kind of what you said, which is you have a code review agent, threat modeling agent, pen testing agent, etc. And I think that's fair. But I think there's also a slightly different school of thought, not so much in the cybersecurity space, but in general, people who are building agents for general purpose stuff, like sales and marketing automation and all that, who essentially say that the job of an agent is to kind of mimic a human. So what you should really have, if you think about the analogy for say cybersecurity, what you should really have is CISO agent and like a security engineer agent, a developer agent, and then you can have like threat modeling where the security engineer agent generates a threat model, the CISO agent or the developer reviews it, and if they talk to each other, and if there's a tie break, then the CISO agent jumps in. Right? So if you build that, I'm not saying it's possible, I'm not predicting it's possible, but if you build that, then essentially source code review, threat modeling just becomes the tasks that these agents do. So I think there's definitely a lot of thinking on those lines. I think there was definitely at least one company who was thinking of building like product security engineer agents. So the idea is there that you train the agent in such a way that they can do everything a product security engineer can do, and then depending on what you want them to do, you kind of make the agent do threat modeling or code review. So that's I think that's like a different way of thinking about it. I kind of every example I see of those kind of persona agents, or I don't know what they call, there's a paper around it, essentially kind of assumes some tolerance to false positives and things going wrong. Right now, I don't know, in like a pipelines type things, I think the tolerance of false positives is pretty high, so we may be okay with it. But if you talk about like an incident response scenario, then the tolerance for making mistakes is very low, right? And if you don't have a good tolerance for making mistakes, then it's hard to train the agents and start using them well. So I think it may need a little bit of a rethink for how to do it in security, and it may be pretty hard. But the reality is that none of these innovations happen just because of technology. It happens because there's some group of individuals who decided to take the technology and really spend all their time, effort, and money to make it happen. So there'll be a startup which builds a lot of these agents. I'm not bullish it'll happen in a year. I think it'll take much longer than that, just because they will not. It's kind of like the self-driving cars thing, right? The technology got there very quickly, but the regulation and the processes and the risk management took a long time to get there. So I kind of feel like, given we are kind of in the risk management industry, I don't know how many of these agents will be used in production very quickly. Things like threat modeling and code review may be easier, simply because they're not in the line of they're not like incident management, right? But I'm not bullish about an incident response agent. Like that I think is way harder and requires a lot more human in the loop, which then starts looking just like automation anyway. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. I'm not bullish about 1 year. I'm maybe bullish about a little longer timeline, and I kind of also feel like I'm not sure where AI agents are going in general. But definitely, if your definition of agents is prompt plus tooling, access to tooling, then I think that'll happen pretty soon. So okay, so that's pretty interesting. Yeah,
I actually agree with you that things like incident response agents could take more number of years, but I think even internal security teams could be working on these, like some of these agents. They don't have to be offered as services, but I think security teams can scale themselves by building the agents. Matter of fact, I think I posted on my LinkedIn, I saw this blog about how this person used Accrue AI to build a number of agents, and they just asked to sort of do a code review of a piece of code, and then there were multiple agents. So like those kind of use cases, scenarios, I think are pretty useful for an Appsec team, like an internal team where you have something and then you just want multiple activities to happen on that.
No, I think I hope there's like, may 1,000 flowers bloom type thing. Like I hope there are like hundreds of people trying these things out. I think the cost of POCing is so low that it's absolutely worth trying. Yeah. And if you find some promise in the POC, it's worth kind of doubling down and spending a lot of resources to kind of make that happen. So I'm with you, man. I think there'll definitely be a lot of really cool experimentation, but we'll see if it hits kind of like production level in a year. But that's a good point. Yeah.
What's your first prediction?
So my prediction is a little closer to what you were saying, but not the same. I think so my essential prediction is, for the first time in a long time, I think security engineering talent can dramatically get better. Okay, so let me explain. I think one of the problems we've always had when you're hiring, and I think we spoke about this in the hiring episode as well, is that it's very hard to get developers who kind of understand security or who can empathize security. It's possible, but it's hard. And it's really hard to have security people who can kind of like write code and build applications and build exploits and stuff like that, right? And we all know that a really good security engineer needs to have some development skills, right? And because the cost of becoming skilled in development is so low right now, I feel like the quality of security engineers we'll have will go up dramatically, because you're already good at some aspect of security. Like if you're already a good pen tester, right, you can really like 2x 3x yourself by learning how to code and kind of writing good code. Maybe you don't even write good code, but you know how to prompt well enough to get the good code out. So if you have a vulnerability management system which is like 30% there, and you kind of want to make it a little better, I think security engineers can do it now. You don't need to go talk to a vendor and figure things out, right? Because they have the power of Copilot and ChatGPT and all those things. Another area to think about is, a lot of data analysis within security, it's kind of weird, because when you get started, like an Excel sheet and stuff and small programs are enough. But then as you get bigger, it becomes hard. And therefore you have to go to a vendor who's very expensive and integration's hard. And, we spoke about this various times, in our podcast. But what happens is, if you have a really good security engineer and they can actually write solid production ready code, then they can combine their security knowledge and the ability to write good code to actually, scale the program without having to go buy like 10 different products. Right? Especially in things like, data analysis, generating metrics, vulnerability management, and those areas, right? So I kind of feel like the quality of good security engineers is going to dramatically, like the really good security engineers were probably like 2-3 times better than the average or the bad security engineers. But now I think they'll be like 10x better than the average of the bad security engineers, right? So if you're a security engineer really good at coding or data analysis and stuff, those things are very easy to upskill now, right? Thanks to AI. And I kind of feel like we will have a crop of really well-rounded, really good security engineers going forward. So I think hiring becomes even more important. Getting a good person in becomes even more important, and investing in them and giving them the tools to become that 10x engineer is really. So I think, that's kind of my first prediction. I think we'll have like an explosion of really good security engineering talent.
Yeah, I think along the same, I actually agree. And I think along the same lines, right? Like, I feel like even those who are not super good security engineers, right? Like, some of the junior folks, even they can up-level their skills. And I have personally experienced this, because what used to previously take me weeks, maybe 2 weeks to write a small piece of script, now takes me a few seconds, because I give the exact scenario I'm trying to write a code for, and either ChatGPT or something, right, will give me that code and I can improve upon that code. So the time to build stuff has drastically reduced for me personally. So I can only imagine what it must be like for pretty much every security engineer in different companies. So I think I agree that the quality of security engineers are going to go up, but I also feel like security engineers could scale themselves a lot better by using things like AI assistants. And
I'm actually I kind of feel like the all these kind of the AI tools, ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot specifically, help people like you a lot more than they help a junior engineer, because like you said, because you got to know what to ask, right? Like it's right. So if you understand the basics of security really well, and you spend like 4-5 years doing application security or incident response, then I think you can do whatever you did much faster. Like in the past, what would happen was, if I had like 10 tasks to do as a staff, like I was a staff security engineer for a while before I moved to become a like an engineering manager, right? But I would have like 10 technical tasks to do. Some of them were kind of easy, just needed to be done. Some of them were like required a lot of thinking, etc., right? So whatever needed to be done, which was easy to do, which is just a repeated, you've done it before, you got to do it one more time. So those you do usually pass it off to junior security engineers, right?
Yeah.
Then that's how they learned, and that's how they got better. I don't need to do that anymore, right? I just have ChatGPT to do it. So what ends up happening is that the junior, I worry for junior engineers, because, right, the staff engineers who wanted to kind of, focus on kind of the higher order thinking and who use junior engineers to learn that, it was a good two-way street, because the junior engineers learned from the staff engineers got extra pair of hands to work on. It's gone now, right? They don't need it anymore. So now the question is, a staff engineer who's invested in growing a junior engineer will still do it because they want to do it and stuff. But if they were doing it just as a way to get around things, then they don't do that anymore. So I actually worry for like an entry-level security engineer, especially in like a remote work culture where you don't go to the office, you don't see people, you don't meet with them, right? I kind of feel like it's harder for them to level up, right? But I'm not very sure about that, right? I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe it's easier to learn security as well now because of these tools, etc. And I'm sure there'll be some people who are industrious, and learn better. But I think the other prediction I'll make, which is not on my list, but since we're talking about it, is that a lot of the security AI-powered security products that will come up. I think the whole point there is to say, hey, can I make a junior engineer work like a staff? I think that is kind of where the real value is, because this whole high-end staff principal engineer type people are very, very hard to find. But it's relatively easier to find like a junior engineer out of like, who's done a master's in security in college, or who played around with some hacking in college and kind of understands coding a little bit. So making them more productive is kind of the real challenge of our times. And I think a lot of startups can kind of solve that problem. Whether they will or not is a different story. But I think that's where a wedge can be.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this sort of spaces out, and what are some things. I'm actually very excited to see how security engineers are able to use AI to either scale themselves or just become better.
Yeah. I think if we combine what you said and what I said, essentially what we're saying is that the way security engineering teams look today will change. Okay,
Yeah.
It's not clear how it will change, but it will change.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So it'll be interesting to see how it changes in maybe like 12 to 24 months. Cool. What's your next prediction?
Okay, so the next prediction is again with AI, and this is AI code review assistants. And by that, what I mean is, so I'm sure you've seen the latest GPT 4.0 model released by OpenAI, where now you can basically have ChatGPT scan whatever code you're writing, whatever you can. I think they have vision, speech, and text all combined now, right? So just imagine an engineer is writing some code, and there's an AI code review assistant hovering over the shoulder, basically on the laptop itself, and seeing what are some mistakes or what are some vulnerabilities if they're writing insecure code. I see a lot of value there, just because previously in the previous world we used to have VS Code extensions, right? Like if you were to move security to the left, the way to do that is to have these assistants embedded in the code editors, and then those extensions would help review the code. I think that's going to change, and the onus would be more on the AI assistant, and that would basically be the code review assistant in a real time.
Yeah. So I think you're right, and I think it'll happen. But I think the harder problem to solve would be, I don't think it's that hard, but I think something to think about and actually do it is that if you're building a code review assistant, then how do you make sure that the code review assistant understands specific things to your company, right? Like, I think that's the thing, right? I mean, if you're writing a string concatenate query, will it find SQL injection? Hell yes. But then, every SaaS tool does it. Every free linter does it, right? So it's not like adding massive value. The massive value really is that you're writing a new feature and you kind of you didn't do the authentication annotation at the beginning of the function. So now that may be accessed without authentication, right? So that is also kind of something maybe a code review tool can understand. But let's say you're writing a new API, but you're not writing the code to integrate that with your API gateway or onboard that to your API gateway. Now for that, it has to understand that you have an API gateway, right? It has to understand your architecture, right? So how you kind of, especially for enterprise use cases, how you kind of think about how you teach these, whatever AI powered code review tool or whatever it is to understand your company context is kind of to me the hardest part, right? And that's where the real value is. And if a product can do that, like that's kind of why I feel that every time I wrote down a prediction, right, I was like, these are not like obvious and definitely will happen. Somebody has to make it happen, right? So if there's someone really smart who puts their mind to it, then I think this can happen. But it's not given. It's not like obvious because there are problems with these things, right? So I agree with you, but I think the whole understanding context, the real value of that, when will they be better, 10x better than the VS Code plugin that you spoke about, or like a SEMrush scan, right, on a PR? It'll be 10x better if it can understand company context in a way that static analysis tools cannot understand, right?
But don't you think it's a solved problem using RAGs? Because the concept of RAGs is to provide knowledge-based context of company-specific documentation. So if this AI code review assistant tool has access to that knowledge base, do you think it's going to be still that difficult of a problem?
Like I said, right? That's exactly what we're doing for the threat modeling piece as CISO. So I'm with you. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's possible. I'm just saying it's not something that will work out of the box, right? So I don't think, the reason even the GitHub Copilot auto fix thing, right? I'm like, it'll work for like the most boring vulnerabilities. But the most easy to fix vulnerabilities are not the problem. The problem is really that really, really complicated vulnerability, which kind of has some context internally and stuff like that, right? So I think, I'm not saying it's not possible. I think I'm pretty bullish it'll happen, but I think somebody has to make this happen. I don't think you're going to be able to just like use an OpenAI key, like a 4.0 key, and make it happen. Like that's not happening, right? It's just that somebody has to think this through. Somebody has to take the model and figure out, what the process is. How do developers write code? How do they think? How do they consume knowledge? How can I consume knowledge the way a developer does? Understand all the context about the company a way a developer knows, and then I become like a peer reviewer for them, right? Like what's the value of a peer reviewer if you're doing pair programming, right? The value is that the other person may have context that you don't have. They're able to talk to you and learn. So all the technical stuff 4.0 GPT 4.0 may replicate, but all the knowledge, the internal knowledge, the non-public knowledge, which 4.0 does not have, has to be added to 4.0 somehow, right? And that somehow RAG may be the solution, fine-tuning may be the solution, but somebody's got to do it, right? And you got to do it in a way that has lesser false positives than current SaaS tools.
And
otherwise
it works for multiple companies. And
this is kind of where I'm not sure, because maybe you have really good security engineers who can build it in such a way that it works for their company, and they don't care whether it can be turned into a product. So people like me need to care about turning it into a product, but people like you don't, right? If you can spend like 2 months doing this for Lyft, your current employer, that's enough, right? You don't need to make that into a product that works for every company in the world, right? That's my problem, right? So if you're a security engineer, I don't think you should think about it that way at all. You should not think about making it work for the world. You should just make it think about how do you make it work for your developers, and if you can make it work, you're done, right? Well, that's cool. That's a good.
I think there are two different perspectives here, right? Like your perspective is more about like selling this to companies like enterprises, right? For me, like you mentioned, it's about I have a problem, I know how to solve it, I can just go solve it. Just give me 2-3 months and I think it'll be solved. So it's again, this is going to be interesting to see how it.
I mean, look, this is no different from any build versus buy discussion. I don't know if we ever did an episode on that, but I know we spoke about it briefly in one of the episodes. It's the same thing, right? I mean, sure, Anshuman's really excited about building this. He's capable of doing it. He builds it. And then 6 months later, he moves on to a different role in the company. He moves on to a different company. Nobody takes ownership of it, and it dies, right? So then what? So then on the other hand, if you build it from a company whose revenue is dependent on having this product working, then it's better. So I think in the end, I don't think fundamental first principle things like build versus buy will ever change, whether with AI or not. But cost of experimentation and stuff goes down. But if you're a security engineer and you think you can solve one of these problems using AI for your company, you should absolutely go for it and not worry about making this into a product. Like that's our problem. That's the problem for people like me, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. What's sorry?
What's your second?
Oh, what's my second one? Let me see. Okay. I think non-AI one for a change, and we'll go back to AI later. Non-AI one is I'm really interested in seeing all this consolidation happen in the security market. Right, all these companies being acquired, right? Like the big ones, the big few funded companies just mopping up so many startups, and I think that's a really interesting trend. And I always wondered if it's because CISOs don't want to have hundreds of vendors and they want to consolidate that. Is that the reason? Because that seems to be the most obvious reason, right? Hey, there are too many products, there are too many tools, I don't want to buy one more. It's easier if I go buy a platform. I think that's the play from Palo Alto, that's the play from CrowdStrike, and a lot of these really big vendors. In my 2-3 weeks that I spent in the US talking to CISOs and other security leaders, and even in Singapore when I was there, is it annoying to have too many vendors? Yeah, the answer is yes, right? But I kind of feel like CISOs feel like, hey, that's the thing to do. You got to do it because that's just a part of this job, right? So I don't think I'm not really sure that the consolidation is happening because the demand side demands it. It's not the CISOs are demanding single platforms and therefore the consolidation is happening. I think consolidation is happening because the market is too fragmented and crowded, right? We had like visibility as a thing, right? Or let's take an example of IAM, right? So when AWS kind of started offering his IAM solution, the idea was, hey, you can do all of IAM within AWS now. It's very straightforward. You know how to give identity to humans. You know how to give identity to applications. You do it. You have different levels of authentication. You'll have different levels of authorization. That's it, right? And now there are like 1,000 different products for really, really niche issues within IAM. And that's great. All of them innovate. All of them solve a particular problem. But can they be big enough to be a $100 million company? I don't know, right? So my prediction, this is a long preamble to kind of what I'm saying. And what I'm essentially saying is that I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation in the security operations DNR space, the detect and response space, because I think that place has gotten really, really crowded. Right, and it's got really, really crowded, and it's becoming very hard to differentiate between companies. They all solve very, very small niche problems, and because you can't have like 14 IAM systems, even if the solution becomes better, people are just like settling for a platform which kind of sort of works, even if it doesn't solve all problems. So I think a combination of two things I think will lead to the consolidation. One, I think it's a very crowded space, and everyone's just solving a niche and not the whole problem. And the second is also that a lot of these startups were funded very, very highly in the ZIRP era, in the 2021 era, where money free flow of money was money was flowing very freely. And I think that gravy train sort of stopped. So they're not able to raise the next round, right? And they know that. And these are smart entrepreneurs, right? So my sense is in the detect and response, in the security operations space, there will be a lot of consolidation in the next 12 to 24. And I think as a corollary, I don't think you're going to see that kind of consolidation in the cloud security, application security space anymore.
I mean, as a follow-up to that, the whole ASPM category of vendors.
Yeah.
I think its consolidation is already happening there, and ASPM essentially covers AppSec and cloud security to some aspect.
Product security.
Yeah. So I think what you're saying makes sense in the DNR space, because I haven't seen much consolidation happening there. But for AppSec and just kind of product security in general, I think it's already starting to happen, right?
No, I kind of disagree with you. I don't think there's consolidation happening at all in that. No, I don't. I mean, there are a lot of ASPM players coming up, right? But you're not saying, hey, I do ABC, you do DEF, let's combine forces and become one company and sell it as a platform, right?
So, a question. So, what do you think about Wiz and Lacework?
No, that's the point. So Wiz and Lacework, I don't compare them to be. I don't consider them to be AppSec. They're more like cloud security. And by the way, the Wiz and Lacework deal did not go through. Right?
I know. Yeah.
Right. So we'll see where that goes. Right. So I think the Wiz and Lacework thing is a little interesting, simply because I think they were not complementary at all. It was just more like a market deal. I think it was more a way to acquire customers and not a way to acquire technology. Right. So I think those things will continue to happen anyway. Right. Two very similar companies, instead of competing with each other, they just combine. But it's not that there was. I mean, again, I'm not an expert on Wiz or on Lacework, but from what I understand, it's not like Lacework has a few things that Wiz does not have, so they're buying them. Right. So when SentinelOne bought acquired PingSafe, right? SentinelOne did not have cloud security, and they acquired PingSafe to get that kind of capability in, right? So I think so those are the kind of things I'm talking about. In the application security ASPM space, that's my next prediction, by the way. So I'll just go through it and finish it off anyway. I think the way I think about it is this, right? In the application security space, we've had fantastic acceleration in defect discovery. Okay, so the way static analysis was 15 years ago when I started, and Fortify was the only game in town, and how we had to run Fortify to get results, versus where static analysis is today with CodeQL and SemRep being some fascinating tools, or even Sneak and others. I think the innovation and speed is phenomenal. Okay, but it's one of those strength of the chain is the weakest link type things, but AppSec programs haven't become faster. And the reason is because I think the processes and the things that ties these things together and the prioritization piece there's been no innovation there. So that's kind of why I feel like there's so many ASPM providers, but there's no breakthrough ASPM company, in my opinion, right? Which is really changing the game right now. Because again, it's there's a lot of not garbage, maybe being harsh, but there's a lot of vulnerabilities coming in from all this tooling, but nobody knows what to do with it, right? And they're but I'm going to put another tool on top of it to make all the tools become better, kind of a thing, right? So, I mean, I don't think the issue is that we don't have enough tooling there, right? I think the issue is that the workflow is not getting compressed, right? The processes are not getting streamlined, right? The processes have not, so there are two kinds of major changes that has happened in AppSec, where the AppSec program has not caught up, okay? So one is that the scanning tools have gotten much better at scanning and finding vulnerabilities. So this is your SAST, SCA, IAS tools, for example. And the second thing is SDLCs have changed dramatically. They've become a lot faster. They've become a lot more iterative. There are no applications anymore. If you have a lot of microservices, it's very hard to define what an application is. We spoke about this in the first episode, right? And with both these changes, the application security processes have not changed. We're still thinking gates, we're still thinking in manual reviews, we're still thinking blocking pipelines and stuff like that, right? So I think the real innovation will happen in application security when somebody finds a way to compress these workflows and bring them on par with where the tooling is, right? Many SaaS implementations I see, they use state-of-the-art technology, but they run the same rules every day for every application. Or maybe they change the rules, they customize the rules for a given microservice or an application, and then don't look at it for the next 18. And that's what leads to all the problems downstream of vulnerability management, where you have so many vulnerabilities, you don't know what to do with them. And then you're like, hey, let's put AI on top of that. And I know we spoke about that recently, right? So I think the real breakthrough in AppSec, and I think this is one of those hope versus prediction thing, right? I want to predict it because I want it to happen, right? Is essentially, I think, somebody's got to find a way, again, I'm sure AI is going to have a part of it, but I think the AppSec processes and workflows will have to finally catch up with the speed of defect detection, right? And I think a focus on, I think AI plays a role on that. And I think essentially this will mean ASPM. I think the definition of ASPM will change. It's still application security posture management, but the focus of ASPM today is on vulnerability management. It's all in the back end, right? Once everything is found. And I think the focus has to shift elsewhere and to make things better. So that's kind of my convoluted prediction for the next 12 months.
No, and actually, I have a similar prediction for ASPM, but this is my long-term one, where I think ASPM is here to stay in short term, let's say 1 to 3 years, but in the long term, I think it's going to go away and going to be replaced by AI vulnerability management agents, like so to speak, where if you model the data in a way that is consumable and easy to explain to an AI agent, right? That look, a vulnerability means like a security defect on an asset resulting in a threat, something like that, right? And I think that is where the core problem is, right? Because if you think about just kind of vulnerability management in general and ASPM solutions in general, I think the problem that most people face is you have these different scanners, right? You want all of them to be funneled into one place. I hate the word single pane of glass, but just kind of have to say that here. And once you have all the data there, how do you make sense of it? How do you contextualize the risk? How do you prioritize all of that stuff, right? So now if you model the data in a way that no matter what scanner you use, no matter what sources the vulnerability information is coming from, the AI will do the work of storing it in a database, whether it is a graph database, SQL, no SQL, I don't know, right? And then the AI agent would be smart enough to answer questions like, okay, give me the most risky vulnerability which has been found in the last 3 days. Now, AI agent would be smart enough to know to look at source code vulnerabilities, Appsec vulnerabilities, cloud vulnerabilities, right? And I think this is where the ASPM category of vendors is either going to evolve or just kind of going to go away, I think.
I think ASPM vendors are already kind of trying to do that, like what is pretty much said, right? Okay. I think they are. I definitely saw a couple who are kind of doing. If I remember the name, I would have given a shout out because I think it was pretty cool when I thought about it. Right, but I don't kind of recall. I saw like 4 at the same time, and when I was at RSA, and now I don't remember which one was what. Right. I think I kind of have a different take on that. I feel like the problem is not at the back end after everything is found. The problem is the way we find things, right? And the way we use like a big hammer for every small thing, right? We have the same set of rules run for everything. We have the same set of problems coming everywhere. So it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out thing. You have like a lot of garbage in coming into tools, and then you want an AI bot to remove the garbage and tell you what's important. And I'm like, no, you should know what's important and just look for that, right? Like that's how this man,
Yeah, I think there are 2 problems. One that you're describing and that one I am describing. The problem is at the front end and also at the back end, right? Because if you, yes, I agree, right? Like how we find vulnerabilities is a big problem, right? So if you build a smart system that can streamline only those things that matter to an organization, and then behind the scenes, you also building a smart system that can answer questions that you really want to know.
Sure. Okay, right? Fair enough. I mean, in the worlds of unicorns and fairy tales, if both happen, it makes all our life easier. That's the best thing. That's going to be
our next $1 billion business. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah.
That's going to be the next whiz, I think. Yeah.
There you go. So, but I have to tell you something on single pane of glass. Someone actually with a straight face told me this, okay? I think they were talking about some company offering or something like that. They actually used the phrase multiple single panes of glass. And I was just like, this is the best thing. Because there were many single. I mean, you have like an Appsec dashboard and you have like something else dashboard. Okay. So you have a single pane of glass for 4 things. So now they become multiple single panes of glass. And I'm just like, okay, that sounds like multiple panes of glass. But anyway, I thought that was kind of interesting. Okay, cool. So I'm out of predictions, man. Those are the only 3 I had. But I know you have like a bunch more. So do you have any more that you haven't covered?
Yeah, I have 4 more. I'll try to keep them short. So the next one is a short term. So recently, I think a couple of weeks ago, CISA, they came up with this guidance on secure by default framework, and I think they've had a few big companies like sign up for that. And one thing that really was refreshing to see was the concept of eliminating vulnerability classes. We have spoken about this extensively in previous episodes as to how important it is to sort of do the root cause analysis and figure out, right, like what is the root cause and how do we eliminate it completely so that we don't see it again. And this was actually mentioned in that. So I'm actually excited because this is the first time I'm seeing like an official entity sort of add this in their guidance of how to build secure and like robust software. So I hope companies heed to this and they start building more resilient software. And I also think it's going to be important because with the pace that the technology is advancing these days, if you don't have a good way to build robust software to be able to support the infrastructure that this new wave of technology needs, we are going to be left way behind, right? So I think, yeah, this is a call for action where if companies are not paying attention to secure by default frameworks, libraries, eliminating vulnerability classes, I think it's high time they start to do this.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. I kind of really like the secure by design. I think you're talking about the secure by design framework, right? Or is there a different one that I missed?
Yeah, no, I think it's secure by design framework, correct?
Correct. Yeah. No, that's I think pretty useful. I think I heard a talk at RSA where they essentially said, yeah, secure by design is great, but in the end it's about incident management. So that's a school of thought which is always there, saying no matter what you do, they're going to be incidents. So first think about incident management. I have like a theory brewing in my head on that. I'll write about it someday. But essentially, I kind of feel like we got to go all the way to the left and all the way to the right, and leave developers to do whatever the hell they want in the middle. Right? Right. Anyway, it's still brewing in my head. Maybe once I kind of think a little bit more about it, I'll write about it. But I think secure by design is great. But I always think about why somebody told me the story. Please fact check me if I'm wrong. Is why cereal was invented in the US? Cereal was invented as a way to kind of have kids consume milk. Right? There was a theory then, I think now theories changed a little bit, that milk is good for kids and they should have cow's milk. And then they were not sure how to do it, so they invented cereal. So cereal is kind of fun. You eat that with milk, and that's how you get it. Same with like Bone Vita and stuff in India if you grow up in India, right? So I think we need that moment for the secure by design thing, right? I don't know what the cereal moment is, because these frameworks are not easy to consume, right? I mean, it sounds great in theory. It's a great paper to read, but I'm like, what is going to make it easy to actually implement that in your product? Okay, or think about that one. So I think that will come from entrepreneurs and companies and businesses, right? When I say entrepreneurs, it doesn't need to be like a startup founder. It can be an entrepreneur within a company who kind of thinks about that, who has the mandate to do it. But I think that's what I'm really excited about. I kind of like the security design framework, especially on things like if you look at it, so many of the vulnerabilities and so many of the attacks are really on basic stuff, credentials being leaked and ransomware attacks and backups being not available and stuff like that, right? So I think at least for those kind of things, secure by design really helps, right? And I'm with you. I think it's one of those things where I hope it gets traction. I'm a big believer in this framework, and I know we've spoken about paved roads and secure by design and secure by default, security by default, and all those things. Let's hope this is the year that it changes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think recently, I think TLDR-sec, I forget his name.
Clint.
There was a repository which is all about awesome secure defaults. So there's a repository that is like an aggregated repository containing all the secure by default frameworks in multiple programming languages. So we'll add it to the show notes. But when I saw that, I'm like, yeah, somebody else is also thinking about it, and they've actually done the hard work of consolidating and making it available to everybody, right? So that has been very helpful. Yeah,
I think you're talking about Rami McCarthy's.
Rami McCarthy, yes.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, that was actually pretty cool. Right, I think we should definitely link that in the show notes. I think he has a GitHub repo and an associated blog with it. I think that was a great resource as well. I agree.
Yeah.
Cool. What else, man? What else do you have?
Okay, so the next one I have is automated red teaming, and I think consulting companies that used to offer red teaming services and pen testing services, right? They are also going to evolve using AI. They're going to offer services like automated red teaming, right? I know they have this concept of assumed breach. Like there are different ways of red teaming, right? So I think that space is also going to get some changes, some improvements, hopefully. And I've also seen companies actually building products and services to offer automated red teaming. It's very interesting because if you think about automated red teaming, like that word, like the phrase itself is scary, because you're essentially saying you're gonna find something, exploit something, and then basically show that as a proof of concept or whatever it is. I don't know how viable this is, how comfortable companies will be, but it's an interesting area to explore for sure.
So you think there'll be AI red teaming in 1 year, where not AI red teaming, but red teaming powered by AI?
Yeah.
Automated red teaming?
Yes. I think it's already happening. I don't know the names of the company, but I've at least seen a couple of companies like startups that are trying to work on this space.
No, it's possible. I mean, the way I look at it is that anyway, when you do red teaming, there was like a lot of automation involved, but they still had like a lot of manual things as well. And essentially, what will happen is it's a matter of degrees, right? So maybe it'll go from 20% being automated to like 80% being automated, and that's the big switch. But when somebody says they're doing AI red teaming using AI, I mean that's more marketing than anything else.
I know.
But but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if red teaming truly gets democratized, because my sense is if you can do red teaming using AI, then why do you need red teaming companies, right? You just need a product, because the whole point of red teaming was you needed like someone to think like a hacker, and you needed someone to kind of like it was one of those things which was very, very hard to do, to do in an automated fashion. Like even if you look at OpenAI, they have like an army of red teamers. Right, who try to test their models before they go live. Right, I think something like 120 or something. I forget the exact number for 4.0. So even like an AI company used manual red teamers to red team their.
Yeah, I know. It's
red team their stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah. So I mean, will there be AI used in red teaming? Absolutely. Is it already happening? Probably, right? But will you be able to like have an agent which does red teaming? That'll be interesting.
Yeah, that'll be interesting.
Again, not in the 12. Like I gotta feel like the progress will be like slow, and then just like really fast, right? Yeah. So it's hard to know when that really fast phase will happen. Maybe in 12 months, maybe in 24 months, but that'll be interesting.
It all depends on when AGI will happen, I think.
Yeah, first we have to define what AGI is, then we'll see.
Yes,
but I'm with you. Yeah. Cool. What else do you have?
Okay. So two more. First one is about hiring. And this is not so much related to AI, but more about, so how OpenAI is giving companies like Google a fight with releasing models, and Google, I feel, is still trying to keep up with them. So I think OpenAI just had their release of GPT-4o, and then Google I/O was happening the next day. And I think people are still more impressed by what OpenAI had to show, and they still don't believe in Google for some reason, because Google keeps shutting down these services and people really love them, right? So because of, and I'm saying all of this because I feel like, how we spoke about hiring in the hiring episode, as to when you interview with FANG companies, right? The focus is on algorithms, data structures, right? Like some of the basics. I think that's going to go away. And with the compensation also decreasing across multiple companies, big tech companies are having these huge round of layoffs as well. So I think, at least from what I've seen and spoken to people, folks are not as keen as joining FANG companies as they are when it comes to smaller companies working on very innovative problems like Anthropic or OpenAI, or like any company that is working on the bleeding edge technology, and they're also offering high compensation and all of that stuff, right? And I think the way interviews happen will also change significantly, right? Because who cares if a security engineer knows what a linked list is or not? I don't think anybody cares, right? With ChatGPT and all this AI stuff. So I think there's some truth there where I feel like we are going to see some really good engineers get hired in smaller companies, and even good engineers from bigger companies move to smaller companies. I've already seen a few of those happen. So that's my prediction for at least hiring.
Yeah. So two things on the hiring stuff, I agree. I think my sense is that was always the case, that really, really good talent who are like very high agency people went to small companies because they have more control over the outcome, whereas in large companies it's a more comfortable job. I kind of feel like FANG was kind of the exception over the last 10-15 years, where they were somehow able to attract the world's best talent, not give them agency, just give them more money and still retain them. I think the FANG companies did fantastically there. Like most big companies don't do that, right? Like IBM stopped being the favorite of candidates much before they kind of became like so large and kind of obsolete. Not obsolete, but became boring. Like Oracle, Cisco, all these companies became boring very quickly. But I think it took a long time for FANG companies to reach this stage. Okay, and credit to them for being able to grow so much and still attract talent at such a high pace, right? But I think this was inevitable. This would have happened anyway, and I'm glad kind of this is happening. Especially given I need to attract talent as a startup founder. I'm happy. I have a vested interest in this. On the Google versus OpenAI thing, have you seen that graph? And we should put this in the show notes as well if you can. It's pretty easy to find. On Slack versus Microsoft Teams adoption. So basically, like if you think about it, like Slack adoption is going this way, like going up slowly, and then Microsoft Teams is like crappy, and then at one point it goes this. Right, and the reason that happens, and Microsoft Teams now has like 3x more adoption than Slack, right? And it's because of the old code that distribution eats product for breakfast, right? So even if is Microsoft Teams an objectively better product than Slack, I think very few people outside Microsoft will say yes, right? And many people inside Microsoft will also say no, right? So I think Slack is probably a better product than Microsoft Teams, but it's distribution, right? Because Microsoft Teams is bundled with Office, and Office is a great product, and it's bundled with SharePoint, and now getting bundled with ChatGPT, right? Because you can have a ChatGPT channel in your MS Teams, which is backend is ChatGPT Enterprise, so it's much simpler, right? So distribution eats product for breakfast there. From that perspective, I won't write Google off here, right? I know on Twitter they're not popular because Google, they shut down services, but I think it's a matter. I mean, if you integrate Google search, like real Perplexity type features in Google search, will I really move to Perplexity? I don't know, right? I won't write Google off just yet. Doesn't mean I'm buying Google stock, but I'm just saying, right? That it's going to be hard to topple Google in the long term. Maybe in the short term, sure. I think there's a lot of excitement. So also, I kind of feel like the OpenAI event was scheduled one day before the I/O event and not the other way around. But that's just like gossip.
I almost want to see what Google comes up with, and I can understand why they're taking so long, right? Because they have they have products that are used by billions of people, right? And they can't just come up with an AI based feature, whatever, and expect it to work without any flaws, right? So and I think I remember seeing something where Gemini or their whatever thing, right, there was some controversy about the sort of data it was showing, and I think it was because of the data it was trained on. I forget, but I think basically the point being that companies like Google have to be really careful with what they release, trying to compete with companies like OpenAI. So I think that's why it's taking them much longer. But there's Google Docs, there's Gmail, and I use these products on a daily basis. So if there's an AI aspect to like a personal AI assistant that can help me sort of combine all of these things and sort of just be there for me, man, I would absolutely pay for that service. So
yeah, exactly. So I think if anybody's interested in kind of learning more about this topic, because when I started my company, I was thinking a lot about this, right? Like whatever I build, why can't an established company just make this as a feature? Should be easy. And they have more money, they have more research talent, they have more salespeople. Why the hell would I ever win, right? I think there's a really good book called The Innovator's Dilemma. I forget the name of the author. I think the author is, I'm looking it up now, Clayton Christensen. Okay, definitely you should read it. I think the title of the book is When New Technologies Cause Great Firms to Fail. Okay, that's literally kind of, I mean, there's examples of throughout history on how when giant technological change happens, the incumbents actually have a disadvantage, right? Because it's harder for them to innovate, they have more to lose, so they don't want to lose their existing revenue, so they kind of, not trying to nuke what they're building and all that. So I think in general, really good book to read if someone's interested in learning kind of more about this. Okay, what's your last prediction for the day?
Okay, the last prediction is the one that I am personally very, very hopeful for, and this is a long-term one. So, if you remember, we spoke about culture, security culture, and establishing a security culture is such an important thing, right? Because if you don't have a culture where security is not considered as a blocking function, right, it becomes very challenging. Like, because more often than not, at least from what I've seen, security is considered as a blocking function, and engineering teams are generally skeptical about security engineers and what requirements they'll have and what not, right? And I think all of it is because of the culture which gets sort of organically grown, right? So what I think could happen is, and I can actually walk through a sample use case which I thought about, right? So let's say you are a security engineer, right? And an engineering team submits a ticket for your team to review it, right? And then the security engineer goes and reviews the ask, right? So let's say the ask is to go through an architecture diagram and do a threat modeling, right? And the security engineer goes and does that, right? And then the security engineer would either come up with recommendations, ask to implement some security controls, right? But I think the way they frame that recommendation or the way they frame that language goes a long way, because I've seen that myself, right? Security engineers have this front where, we are asking you to do this, and if you don't do that, we are going to block you. And I think the point when security engineers start to feel this way and say these things is when the culture goes downhill, right? So now imagine there's an AI, right? AI agent that sort of acts as a guardrail / filter to all of these communications happening between security teams and engineering teams. And this all this agent will do is change the tone of that recommendation in a way that is more empathetic, is more sort of helping, right? So instead of saying don't do this or use this, the AI agent would say, look, this is a problem. This is why the problem is something that needs to be solved, and I can help you walk through how you can solve this problem using the recommended frameworks, right? More often than not, security engineers don't do this kind of research or just kind of provide this kind of a service. And I think that should change, because if that changes, man, just imagine the culture of security that gets baked in organically. So again, it's a very hypothetical, dreamy kind of a hope, but I really hope, because strategy eats culture. Culture eats strategy. It's the other way around, right? And I think it's really important to focus on the culture, and we have to get innovative to solve that problem.
Well, I can guarantee you, I never thought I did not come up with that at all, in the sense that I did not think about this at all. But I think it's interesting to spend more time thinking about it, because if the goal of AI is not just like incremental progress and like fundamentally change things, then are these the kind of things that we can do? Like, there are things we haven't been able to do for many years. I think that's a great point, man. I think that'll be interesting.
Yeah, almost like when I was coming up with this, I'm like, this could be a business idea that, but yeah, it'll be an interesting one if somebody at least starts to think about it.
No, I think that makes sense. I think more than half our predictions are like hope lists, list of hope things, that predictions. But that's okay. I mean, I guess it's visual thinking more than predictions. But if some of them come through, then we can claim credit for it. So that's completely fine. Yeah,
absolutely.
Okay, well, I think it's the end of season, episode 10 and season 1. So I mean, I've had a great time kind of having this conversation, Anshuman, and I've had a great. I mean, it's always nice to kind of, when people reach out and talk to us about this as well. So any last words from you before we kind of wrap up the season, Anshuman?
I mean, I've had a blast as well. I've learned so much, which again I knew I would, right? Because I know you've had a lot of experiences and just kind of the different perspectives and experiences that we've both shared. And I think the way our conversations went, it didn't feel like we were doing a podcast, right? It was more free flowing conversations, which is something I really enjoy, right? Because it's really refreshing to have conversations about some things that you're really passionate about, and the other person is also the same, and they've had similar experiences, right? So yeah, man, I've had a blast. I don't know what we'll be doing in season 2, but I'm actually looking forward, because I think there's so much more to learn, right? Because so far in season 1, it's only us. We have shared what we believe, what we have seen, what we've heard. Now I think we should try to learn from others as well, because I'm sure folks have been thinking about these problems at length. So it'll be interesting.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree with you. I've had a blast as well. Thank you for kind of doing this with us. And then, I mean, for everyone listening, if you have ideas and thoughts on what we should do on season 2, especially if there are people other than Anshuman and Sandesh's voice that you want to hear, please let us know, and we'll be happy to kind of have guests. For now, we'll go take a break, for a few weeks or months, and then we'll reconvene and think about what to do for season 2. So thanks everyone for dialing in, for all the feedback, and hopefully we'll see you soon in season 2. Thank you for joining us. If you like the show, please share this with your friends and colleagues. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Anshuman on Twitter at Anshuman_BH. That's ANSHUMAN_BH. And me, Sandesh, at Jubba on Jeans. That's JUBBAONJEANS. See you next time.